I so
Lock in Sakazuki.
yeah, let
Okay,
me start my
sorry.
recording. I bye. So Sakazuki today we'll be interviewing Sakazuki, also known as the owner of Skypiea. Some people, wink wink, say that he's the best One Piece debater to ever face this community. Today I'll be interviewing him and asking him a few questions. So to start off with Sakazuki, how good do you think your server is in comparison to other servers within this community?
I think that if we're talking about all time, is that what we're doing right now? We're
Yeah,
talking
all
all
time.
time or just current?
All time.
All time. I think that the one thing that Skypiea has that no other server that I know of at least had is the longevity. I mean, we're like closing in on like damn near a year of just straight being the most active and most consistently active server in the entire community. I think the one thing we do lack though is like
The
the
big
peak of
debates.
activity, the big
Hmm.
debates, just because of the comms shrinking in size. But I do think relative to when we became a thing and the size of the com, we're one of, if not the most successful server
Hmm.
in this com's history.
Okay. Do you think there'd be any way to bolster the size of the VCs you get? Because most people, whenever they look at Skypiea, they imagine Archie, they imagine Goons, they imagine Apollo, they imagine C. Do you think there's a way to increase the roster of high level debates in which you're having your server? And if so,
For
how?
sure. I mean, I think that there's two main ways I could think about doing that. I mean, one is obviously finding people from the comms past that have had big names. I mean, obviously, Apollo and Archie are two people from the old com that have big names that have continued to be in this server.
Hmm.
But obviously, people who have left the community over time, such as Arrowflame and other people like that, bringing them back could obviously help. But I do think that would be difficult given different circumstances with doxers and all of that sort of thing.
Hmm.
But I think that the main way that I think is the best way to find new debaters that could rise to that level is just genuinely continuing to expand the server and find new debaters who like debating and genuinely enjoy doing it. And I think that over time and as Skypiea grows and more debates happen, more events happen, those people can rise to that level rather than just finding people that are already at that level from the past. I
Hmm.
think the best thing to do is, increase the size of the community and find new people and let them grow as debaters.
Hmm. That makes sense. So now I'd ask you, many people are very contentious about your skill. So there have been various debates as to are you better than Bridge? Are you worse than Bridge? How good are you? Would you debate Bridge again if you had the chance to cement your status?
Would I debate Bridge again if it were to cement my status? Um, for me, I think I wouldn't, and there's a very specific reason why. Right? For example, I'm not going to call out any names, but just the other day, I was talking with someone about my bridge debate, and they essentially argued that he was mental nerfed during the debate, and that is why that feat won't count for me. And for me personally, I feel like when there are people like that who are going to go to the extent of arguing mental nerfs to discredit feats that I have, I don't think me debating that guy another time or another 5 times, it's really going to change their opinion and they're going to try to find a reason to downplay me regardless. And that's probably the reason I wouldn't waste my time and do that again.
Hmm. Overall, within the One Piece community, if you were to make a top five, how would it go? Who would be at the top and who would be at the bottom of the top five?
So, would this be including myself?
Yep.
All right. So, the one person I'm just going to not include because I think we can all agree is just sort of this like lore legend guy that none of us know about is Business Email. So, I'll just leave him out of the list for now.
Mm-hmm.
But if I were to have to make a list, I'd place myself at one. I think at two, I would probably have to go with. Ooh, that's tough.
Mm.
I'd probably go Draco
Okay.
at two. At three, I would probably go with Kruos.
Whoa.
4, I would go with Moose. And I think with those two for their placement, the reason I'm doing that is because of their Star Wars debate. And then at 5, maybe I mean I don't think there's too many good people that do One Piece, and I think that Infinity beat Bridge when they did debate One Piece, so maybe Infinity at 5, unless I'm forgetting someone. I might be forgetting someone important, but I think Infinity at 5 should be fine.
Well, do you not think that Bridge makes the top 5?
The reason why I wouldn't put Bridge in the top 5, I'd have him directly outside of it at 6, is because, as I said, Infinity did beat Bridge on in One Piece on verdict. It was a very contentious debate, in my opinion, but I think Infinity ended up winning that one.
Okay, this makes sense. How big would you say the gap would be between yourself, who is at 1, and Draco, who would be at number 2?
I think it would depend on topic within the verse. I think when it comes to topics such as the Admirals versus the Yonko, which is sort of both of our main topics. I mean, in terms of me supporting the Admirals and him taking the Yonko, I think there's a pretty wide gap. I don't think his arguments are too good for that. But I do think it would be closer on like the smaller, like the lower tiers of the verse. I think that he does have a lot of knowledge on a lot of scans and different data books and like stuff like that. So I think his skills for those are pretty unique in a sense. They're not like, because I feel like when we look at inverses, a lot of the time it's the same arguments recycled over and over and over again. So you know the repetitions, you know what's going to happen like that. But the thing is with Draco is because he has all of that knowledge, a lot of those lower tier debates, he's going to have different scales that I haven't heard of before, which I think will make some of the debates more interesting. So I wouldn't say it's too large of a gap, but I think on our main topic within the verse, I think there is a little bit of a gap for sure.
Okay. That makes sense. In terms of overall, why do you think people try to discredit your skill level?
I think there's a couple reasons for it. I mean, one, I think I understand some of the criticism in the sense of I don't debate that much. I haven't had that many debates. So I think that for some people to understand that, you know, this guy debated like realistically 6-7 times and has feats that really should put him at this certain level. Some people may not want to accept that. That might be part of it. Another part of it is self-admittedly, like I'm very brute in my opinions. Like if I have an opinion, I'm going to say it straight up to people's faces.
Yeah.
And people may not like that, and because of they may take it out on my skill level. And then I guess the third reason is obviously I think a lot of people agree is a lot of people are biased to their friends in the community. And I mean that's fine. I mean, being biased to your friends is fine. And I feel like if I beat someone's friend, I may not get credit for it, and that's how it might be at the end of the day. So I might just need to, take that. And
who would you say, which friend group possesses and holds the most amount of bias or friend upscaling, if I should say?
Are we talking all time or are we talking right now?
I think all time and right now would be generally the same for me, but let's say right now.
For right now, I think it's pretty clearly, and I think most people would agree, is Infinity's friend group. I mean, it's not only just their core people. I mean, like Infinity, Tensa, Sarugi, etc. It's also the fact that because of how many students Infinity's taken in, these people are also harboring the same beliefs, and it's sort of just like, spiraled to the point where, I mean, there's kids that literally have not heard a singular debate from some of these people and are placing them tier 1, tier 2. I mean, I'm not saying they may not or that they are not tier 1 or tier 2, but like it's to the point where people are just placing it just based off of the vouch that they're hearing from Infinity, who's their teacher, or something like that. So I'd say it's probably Infinity's group at this point in time, for sure.
Do you think that it would be any different if we considered all time?
In my opinion, the only reason I'd say it's a little bit different all time is I do think that the D plus friend group has some like crazy lore that they've built. I also do think that like that little Naruto group with like Troy, for example, having as much hype as he does. Although Troy's my boy, I'm cool with him 100%. He gets a lot of hype. I feel like the older gen groups like that were really good at building lore for people who didn't really even debate like that. Whereas I feel like for Infinity's group, he's better at making people who do debate better than they actually are, if that makes sense.
So you think they excel in different levels of dick ridery? Okay, this makes sense. So, aside from that, who would you say would be the best current active debaters?
So I'd say in terms of the best active debaters, are you gonna say within Skypea or
Yeah, within Skypea, because that's
within
really the only
Skypea?
active community.
Yeah, for sure. So I think that I'd have to go with Infinity,
Archie.
Apollo,
Mm-hmm.
Infinity, Apollo, and then
Archie.
I think that Archie and Jester. I think those four. I think have set themselves apart in a sense in terms of a lot. There's a lot of factors to it. It's not only just the fact that they've all like gotten quote unquote feats on each other. It's also just that they've all performed consistently. Although I think that all of them do have some anti feats here and there. I think that consistently speaking, they perform at a certain level, and that level is above that of the next tier down.
Would you say there are any up and coming debaters who are reaching that level?
That are reaching that level.
Yes.
I think that up and people that are reaching that level, I don't know about reaching that level, but I feel like people that are improving and are definitely putting in the work to improve. I think there are a lot, and I'm not gonna lie. Although I was talking about Infinity's group in terms of like boosting up people and making them look better than they may actually be, I think Infinity has also facilitated a lot of people to improve themselves as debaters. And I think that if you look in each tier, there's many people you can lay out. When you look at that middle tier approaching that high tier, I think yourself, Yanni, C, I think you guys have all continuously improved, and you guys are continually improving as you guys do more and more debates. I think when you look in the tier below that, and also for the mid tier, like someone like Manny maybe, but then the tier below that, I think people like, for example, Hero, who's new to debating, Flames, etc. Wait, hold up. Like I said, it's based off a tier. I'm saying that although he may not be as good yet, and I do still think, like I said, he's in the low tier, but he is. They're all putting in that work to improve, and they're slowly improving over time. And I think as he gets more experience, he'll move up as well, not to the high tier, but up from the lower tier.
Would you say that there is a definitive worst debater right now?
A definitive worst debater. I would say there's a worst debater. I think that there's a lot of people in that low tier that sort of beat up on each other, depending on the topics. So I think it's hard to say that there's a definitive worst debater. And in the same way, I also do think it's hard to say that there's a definitive best debater. I think that it's really topic dependent. I think at a certain level on both ends of the spectrum, people are around that same skill level. And depending upon topic, one can beat the other and one could lose the other.
What would be your opinion on all of these new gen debaters claiming that they beat Jester?
I feel like part of it is a little bit of dick ride, but at the same time, I have watched some of the debates, and I do believe Jester has lost some of the debates. So, I do think there's some truth to it, and I also do think that some of it is sort of like a group dick ride thing where it's sort of like, oh, let's beat up on the old gen guy and let's get a feat and we'll all vouch for each other sort of thing. But I also do think that some of the debates he is in fact losing, although I do think some of the topics that he's losing aren't necessarily his best topics based off of his previous debates from a couple years ago and a year ago. Yeah.
What would need to be done for you to return to debating?
What would need to be done? to be honest, the main thing that would need to be done is it's a big ask, and it's a probably something that'll probably never happen. Is sort of for the atmosphere around debating to sort of change. Um, and I can sort of elaborate into that. It's sort of, for example, it's like, let's say I debated you right now. It's okay. I debate this guy. We agreed to a judge. Let's say I get judgment, right? And if I get that judgment, now I got the judgment. I can go out and say I won the debate, but then you're also right in the current status of the calm. You're also gonna go around. You're gonna show your friends the recording and be like, "Oh, I think I won," and then your friends are more than likely gonna say, "Oh, I think Shinra won," and then now all of a sudden, even though I got judgment, half the community thinks I lost. Another half thinks I won because of the judgment, and then outside of that, it's like I don't feel like I gain anything. And then it's sort of the opposite. If I lose judgment, then it's like if I were to accept the judgment because I go by judgments, then I lost. But now it's just like a lose-lose scenario. It's like I don't feel like I'm gaining anything. And then on top of that, it just feels like there's really nothing to gain, as I said, because I feel like people try to downplay feats, discredit feats because a certain people got that feat, or the person who lost is their friend or something like that. And I feel like there's not too much to gain, and I feel that if that were to change, and also the hostility around debating, I feel like if that also changed to where rather than, we're competing so hard to, beat each other, it's more so, oh, we're going to, have a conversation, try to get as close to the truth as possible, and then have someone judge who did a better job justifying their position. I feel like that would also help, but I think those things in combination, for sure.
Okay. I think that makes sense. That makes sense. Would you say that people in the the old times of debating, they relied too much on judgments compared to now? Would you say you'd be better off with appealing to common consensus rather than any form of judgment per se?
Um, I think it's a mixture, if that makes sense. I do think there are certain situations where obviously relying completely upon a judgment can be flawed. I mean, we've seen obviously some people just agree to a random judge just for the sake of progression, right? Because we'll have someone that says, "Oh, I won't debate you unless there is a judge," and then the one person just won't care about the judge, so they'll just agree to any random judge, and that sort of leads to a sort of incompetent or biased judge being chosen. And then that sort of makes the judgment sort of, do we really care about it? But then at the same time, with consensus, there is also the aspect of just, dick riding. I mean, it happens. People are going to be like, "Oh, I dislike this guy. I'm a vote against him." I think that the best thing that can be done is, one, increase the importance of having a judge so that both sides are seeking to find, an impartial and competent judge. And then two, when we are looking at consensus, rather than just having a poll in a general chat or a poll in announcements, instead, you guys choose, 5 to 10 people that have a consent, not necessarily that you guys think are impartial or unbiased or competent, but rather that have the consensus of the community thinking that they are, around the mid tier or a high tier or whatever, and have those 5 to 10 people vote on the debate rather than just having everyone debate, because obviously that will help mitigate dick riding in a sense. So I feel like there's a way you can make the consensus better, and there's also a way you can make the judgments better.
Okay. What would you feel about new gen debaters ranking themselves extremely highly? What do you think of that?
I mean, I think that, for example, there are some new gen debaters that are in fact that good, or are somewhat in that conversation. But I also do think there are a lot of new gen debaters that overrate themselves. And
Do you have any
I think
names?
that overrate. Okay, just to clarify, right? When we're talking about new gen, how new are we?
Like, let's say they weren't debating around the time of Aeroflame, but they started debating, let's say, a year ago. Or they started becoming relevant around that time period.
Yeah, for sure. So someone like, for example, and obviously it's going to be contextualized to the tier I believe they're in. So, for example, someone like Yanni, right? He's my friend. I cool with him. I fuck with him for sure, right? But there are people that I feel like he will place himself above that he hasn't necessarily beaten yet, but he thinks that he's improved enough to where he can justify placing himself above them. And for me, I feel like that's the biggest thing with this comm is that in a lot of new gens specifically, I don't see it as much with old gens, but new gens specifically is they will lose a debate, let's say 2 months ago, right? And then for the next 2 months, they're going to try improving themselves. They're going to, improve their rhetoric. They're going to go, gain more knowledge. And then after those 2 months, they're then going to say they're better than that person they lost to 2 months ago. Now, thing is, though, they won't now debate that person. And I feel like that's the issue, and what causes some new gens to overplace themselves is because instead of debating and beating that person that did beat them, they're just going to claim they're better than that person. I feel like that's where the issue lies. And obviously, they may have improved to be better than this person, but I feel like if you have that opportunity to debate that person and actually prove it, I think that's a lot more definitive than just like sort of having this like lofty estimation of how much better you got versus how much you lost by.
Okay. That's a perfect explanation. So, overall, do you think that people place too much value in terms of your skill in philosophical debates compared to fictional debates?
So are you basically saying do you think that
Do you think people overrate IRL
overvalue
debaters?
Oh, okay, yeah. I do think they do in a sense. And I think the reason for that is because obviously when IRL debaters are, a lot of the times they're going to devolve into a lot more complex stuff. Because at the end of the day, when you're a fictional debater, you're debating about a fucking comic book. You're debating about manga. It's going to be a lot more simple. It's going to be about interpretations. But at the end of the day, for me, and I think I've talked about this with you before, is at the end of the day, what I believe a debater is going to be how good you are at convincing an audience of your position. Now, obviously, I think that that sort of idea of convincing is something that I think obviously is somewhat contingent upon your knowledge and argumentation to some extent. But I also do think when you go topic to topic, you're going to remain somewhat around the same level. It's not going to teeter off too much. So I don't think that IRL debaters should just be held to this way higher standard just because they're talking about more complex stuff. But I would agree with the fact that I do think the average IRL debater is better than the average fictional debater. And the reason for that is that I do feel like the upper half or the upper tier of the fictional debaters do understand arguments and how arguments are formed, and they understand likelihood, they understand this like whole thing with interpretations. But I feel like the middle tier, a lot of times what they struggle with is really tracking arguments and understanding like how to attack an argument. And the thing is with IRL debaters is that they sort of, the topics they do is like really, really contingent upon that. And you can't really just be carried by like a really easy scale that you got from someone else. You have to be able to argue each of those premises for like whatever you're arguing for. And I do think that will cause the average IRL debater to be better than the average fictional debater, if that makes sense.
Okay. To wrap up the interview, I have one final question. Do you believe in the statement whenever people start debating philosophy and claim that after a while they've gotten significantly better? Do you believe in that? Do you think that's valid? Or do you think it's just a method to run from their fiction anti-beats?
I think it's really context dependent. I mean, like I said, if something they lacked is that like ability to, track arguments and attack arguments properly and sort of format their own arguments, and they went to IRL and they've sort of improved those specific things and they're claiming that they've now gotten a lot better, then I think they should go for it. And I think they probably did get better. But if people went to IRL debating from fictional debating and really didn't improve anything in a sense, they didn't like specifically work on their argumentation, they didn't work on their rhetoric, all they did was really just switch topics in a sense and to start gaining knowledge on IRL instead of gaining knowledge on some random verse, I think then at that point you're really not doing anything. You're just sort of staying the same and you didn't really like prove anything, if that makes sense. You're
Okay.
just, like you said, running away from a topic you did do, and then now just claiming you're better in a different topic, even though you're really just doing the same thing, same argumentation, same rhetoric, but different topic.
Okay. Well, that has been Sakazuki, the owner of Skypiea. If you like this video, please remember to like and subscribe. Join his server, Skypiea, discord.gg/Skypiea. And hopefully he'll give me Gorosei. That's been it. W interview. Goodbye.